Well, there we have it, folks. The BBC is more bent than a 9-bob note. We've seen with the BBC chairman, the outgoing BBC chairman, that the likes of Gary Lineker, remember him, and of course David Dimbleby, who used to be on the telly more than the adverts, they're saying, actually, the government should never choose the BBC chairman. Tell you what, folks, they're starting to sound like they're singing from my hymn sheet, because if the BBC wants to be independent and away from government control, then it ought to scrap the licence fee. That would free the BBC to be truly independent, and it would free all of us who are forced with threat of prison to be free not to pay for the BBC if you don't want to watch its content, which, by the way, I do. Its archive, I think, is pretty good. I should be able to fund it on a choice basis and not forced with a threat of prison. So Lineker and Dimbleby, get on board with Grimes. Now, Benjamin, do you agree with that? Because, I mean, it has obviously been under scrutiny over the past, 48 hours, even longer, with this inquiry going on about Boris Johnson's appointment of Richard Sharp as the BBC chairman in general. Do you think, actually, this does suggest that the chairman should be totally removed from government and then, therefore, should we scrap the licence fee?
I mean, look, I think those are two very different things. So the BBC was quite angry about the suggestion that the chairman was appointed by the Prime Minister, even though we can all see that's obvious. So the BBC board technically appoints it, but in reality, it's a government decision. I think that's completely absurd. And when you talk about Gary Lineker criticising it now, but not criticising it in the past, I think it should be taken out of their hands. But the truth is, if we went with your way of doing things, the cost of the BBC to those who would subscribe would be far more for less content than the model that we have now.
But it would be a lot fairer.
And that's why I think we should keep it.
It would be a lot fairer. It's like what you say about taxation, Benjamin, right? That those with the broadest shoulders should pay for it. So, therefore, those who actually want to watch the BBC should be the ones that pay for it.
But the truth is, basically everybody watches the BBC. It's about 99% of people. You do. It's like oxygen. You don't even realise you're consuming the BBC.
No, I do, because I don't watch it. Because when they come round to my house and say, oh, you haven't paid your TV licence, I want to be able to look them in the eye and not lie to them. Honestly, anybody who pays their TV licence, it's like paying for carrier bags at the checkout. You don't have to do it. Nobody's ever been arrested for taking a carrier bag and not paying for it. Just try not paying the TV licence, see what happens.
They're going to try and catch you up now.
We're not advocating theft on the panel tonight, Leo.
I mean, Albert, do you think there's something to be said for the fact that Gary Lineker has never actually criticised the BBC chairman before now, you know, whilst Blair was appointing them, for example, and all of a sudden, because Boris Johnson did it, he wants to stick his oar in and get angry about it?
There's plenty to criticise the outgoing BBC chairman about. I don't know if Gary Lineker is criticising him about the right thing. It's perfectly reasonable for members of staff of the BBC to be angry at what's gone on. But I take a small C Conservative approach to BBC reform. I'm pretty comfortable with the licence fee. I'm pretty comfortable with the government's appointing the BBC chairman, or essentially appointing the BBC chairman. That doesn't make me feel uncomfortable, but they do need to make better choices at the people that they put into those positions.
I think it's strange, personally, that people are taking the example of Richard Sharp to say that the BBC is therefore a Tory mouthpiece. I think most of us know that people working within the BBC are probably not majority Tories, are they really? I think we spoke about this before. It's about the culture within the BBC, and whoever the chairman is, and I personally don't think he should be appointed by the Prime Minister. I think that is a recipe for corruption and at least accusations of. But I think the culture of the BBC is what makes it how it is, and that's why people find it politically biased, because of the people working within it rather than the chairman.
But the government's appointed the chairman for the entire time that the BBC's been around. Are you saying it's been corrupt for the last 100 years?
No, but it's open to accusations of corruption for that reason.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the point, right? Fundamentally, I mean, I don't see why it's primarily single mothers who are prosecuted, because they're more likely to be in the house for non-payment of the licence fee. I don't see why we should continue having this debate year in, year out, as we increasingly do, and not actually call for the reforms that would stop that from happening.
Does any part of you worry that by getting rid of the licence fee, Britain might be losing something that has meant a lot to people for generations.
Yeah, we'll be losing state propaganda. I mean, come on, there shouldn't be. The Fourth Estate is there to hold the government to account. So there can't be any, they can't be dependent on the government then allowing a licence fee to be collected. It's a ridiculous conflict of interests.
And as I said at the start, right, I actually want the BBC to actually perform better, right, because it has Britain in its name. I want everything associated with this country that I love so dearly to do well, but I don't think it will do well, and it's increasingly, its licence fee is frozen right now because of inflation pressures and cost of living crisis. If it was free from that, it would be able to set its subscription rates as it wants.
It could spread its wings.
Absolutely. Unleash its potential. Jugs could go global.
I think it would be the end of the BBC.
I don't.
Well, fingers crossed.
I don't want to see the end of the BBC. I'm a big BBC supporter. I do consume a lot of their content. I'm very happy to pay the licence fee.
The BBC is completely redundant now.
I think it performs a very important service to this country.
But I'm sure Benjamin will agree that it's a regressive flat tax on everybody. So, the old people living off a pittance pay the same amount as a millionaire. I mean, Benjamin, that's horrifically unfair, isn't it?
I mean,
the BBC
actually
should be
they don't,
cancelled.
because there are people who are exempt from paying the licence fee, right? And it was the Tories who removed the free licence fee for, over 70s, right? So that was a choice that I think was wrong.